Okay, and here we are. Welcome, welcome from around the world as we warm up for today's Ask Me Anything on AI transformation with a focus on HR leaders. We'll do intros in a minute, but you have co-host today. You have Zapier's CEO and co-founder Wade and myself, Brandon. I lead the people team at Zapier. But as we're warming up, we have folks coming in. Welcome, welcome. And as you see from our teammate Leah in the chat, go ahead and let us know where in the world you are joining from today. We'll take a look at that for about a minute and then we'll kick off because we had over 150 pre-submitted questions for today's AMA. And we're going to get to as much of that as we possibly can. All right, and here we go. I'm going to put in my own. I'm joining from Berkeley, California today. There we go. We have colleagues from Brazil and Texas and Canada, Nigeria, Michigan, that's where I grew up, Maine, New Zealand, Poland, Salt Lake City and Barcelona, and the list goes on and on. And so, we'll just start with a thank you. Everything we're about to talk about today, it's clearly a timely topic for all of us as we're guiding our organizations. Thank you for making time, literally, all over the world for today's conversation. Thank you to everyone who pre-submitted questions. We've bucketed as many of those as possible into themes, and we're going to cover as much as we can today. So thank you for being with us. A couple of housekeeping items as we kick off. First, today's conversation is being recorded, and that means we'll share it back with you for posterity and with folks who couldn't join us live today, but definitely wanted to be in the conversation. The second is thank you for pre-submitting questions, but you can also ask questions now, and we'll get to many of those as we can. There's an upvoting feature in the app that we're using for today's conversation, and so feel free to upvote other folks' questions, and we'll use that upvoting to prioritize everything that we talk about today. And then last but not least, if you're having any hiccups with the webinar app itself, try it on Google Chrome. It works really well on Chrome. All right. Who's the cast of characters that you're going to hear from today? I'm actually going to kick it over to Wade first to introduce himself, and then we'll come back to yours truly.
Thanks, Brandon. Hey, folks, I'm Wade. I'm one of the co-founders, CEO here at Zapier, and have the pleasure of working alongside my co-host here, Brandon.
And yes, I am Brandon, Chief People Officer at Zapier. We do all the things you would expect from a people team, from talent attraction and hiring to onboarding, talent development, total rewards, the whole deal. It's been a true pleasure. Wade and I have been working together for over 4 years now. And as we get into where we're going today, really a four act play. First, a lot of folks asked just for a little bit of detail on Zapier's AI journey so far. And so we'll start there in a mini case study. We then took all the pre-submitted questions and put them into themes, and we'll actually Wade and I will get into conversation. You're going to hear a little bit about the choreography across the CEO and the CPO as well as it relates to AI transformation. A few folks requested demos of practical AI and automation use cases. So we've got a couple of those we will do live, and then we'll get into live Q&A. And again, thank you for populating that as we go along. Please do upvote your colleagues' questions based on what you most want to talk about as we get into the back half of our conversation today. Okay. So first, a lot of folks asked to relate, hey, like generally speaking, what have the ingredients been so far for, scaled AI adoption within Zapier? And, it really got Wade and I thinking about kind of the present state more broadly, with like all of our organizations. You may have seen, for example, recently a study that showed that 95% of AI pilots are failing. And when I don't know about you, Wade, but when I saw that, I wasn't actually surprised. And I wasn't surprised for the two reasons that we wrote up on the right-hand side of the screen right now. The first is there's naturally a lot of focus on new tools and AI models and things of that nature, super exciting, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. The talent and operations piece of this, like a lot of other tech transformations, is really where the rubber hits the road. And so to the extent that not all organizations have found their stride yet. When we talk with our peers, this is one of the top things that comes up. It's like the technology is really interesting, but we have a lot to account for as it relates to the talent and change management pieces of the equation. Wade, anything else you're hearing from fellow CEOs on this?
Yeah, I think the thing I would add, yeah, similar to Brandon, not too surprised at this stat, but at the same time, I don't think it worries me too much. When I go spend time with, especially younger, much younger companies, you think like these very new startups that are like 5 people, building something for the first time, and you hear how they work. How do they ship code? How do they do marketing? How do they do um, any of the workflows they have in the organization? They look very different with AI. They're using it in such different ways. And what that tells me is like it's going to happen for the rest of us, but it's going to take time. I see organizations struggling with a couple things. Brandon, you mentioned the tooling side of the house. A lot of times folks will say, "Hey, we want to be AI first," but then they don't actually really provide access to the tooling. They don't think through how to deploy it inside the organization. And so you can get stalled there. Then, if they do provide access to the tooling, they don't always think about the cultural implications. And so you'll see organizations struggle with that. How do I find time to learn how to get better at using the tooling when I've got this OKR to hit, when I've got this launch goal to drive? And those types of things can also hold back teams. And so there very much is a tooling and culture and organizational component that all have to kind of get married together to make progress.
Mhm. That's what I'm hearing and seeing. Uh, and so, when we were boiling this down into, call it three success factors, it's the three things we'll talk about here. The first is around talent. At the end of the day, AI is developed by humans, it's deployed by humans, and a lot of the bigger opportunities that our organizations are pursuing are also kind of, they're conceived of by people too. And so here too, like when it comes to AI fluency, or how we think about hiring, like our next wave of employees to join the company, we naturally think about how to make sure folks are equipped to make the most of the moment with AI. The second is culture. And the best definition of culture I've ever heard for folks that are curious is, culture is the answer to those what happens when moments within an organization. It's not necessarily the company's values or the company's mission. You can hope that those are accurate reflections of the actual culture, but they're not necessarily the culture. So you think about, things like what happens when, someone has an unhinged idea. How do people respond? What happens when a team experiments and it doesn't work, right? Those what happens when moments and how the team shows up within that, that's really a company's culture. And experimentation turns out one of the key ingredients for finding success with AI. It's not surprising, but what we're seeing at Zapier and with a lot of the organizations that we work with is that these AI transformation journeys that we are on are basically pressure tests of our organizational health. And a lot of that has to do with culture. And then last but not least, success metrics. At the end of the day, AI it's a tool. It's a medium for getting things done. It's not the outcome in and of itself. And so, really anchoring experimentation and building with AI on you know the things that already matter most within the organization, and how can we make sure we're aligned on what those things are, and how do we make sure we have good ways of measuring them and sharing that out transparently so we can learn quickly together. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about the talent piece of this equation. And for this next one, I'm going to hand it over to Wade.
Yeah, so we are trying to develop talent for an AI first organizations. How do you actually go about this? Uh, I think there are a couple steps that are really important for enabling your organization to meet the moment here. And the first one is you actually have to tell the organization that you want to do this. And this is something I see a lot of companies get right. It's easy to sort of mock the CEO memo these days and be like, "Hey, CEOs are writing these memos about being AI first." That's what I actually believe it to be a very important conversation, a very important step is to say, "Hey, we want to go do this." Because without doing it, how is the organization going to know that this is a thing we actually care about? So you have to start with that. That said, it's generally not enough. Many of you might be in organizations where that's all that has been done. And you're like, okay, well, we sort of know we want to do it, but then there's question mark, question mark, question mark. That comes next. From there, I think there's a couple next steps that if you do these things, you will start to actually move the ball down the field and make progress. First is you do need to give your organization access to some amount of tools. So this is where your procurement, your general counsel, your finance team need to work together to say, we are going to provide access. You're going to provide access to things like maybe it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Maybe you're going to provide access to your engineers to Claude Code or Cursor. For your non-engineers, maybe it's Zapier and Zapier agents. But you have to have a set of tools that they're actually able to go experiment, play with, learn from. And you want those tools to be vetted in compliance, etc. And so right now, your general counsel, your procurement teams, your finance teams, they actually play a really critical role at accelerating adoption by allowing folks to get their hands on this technology in safe and compliant ways. The organizations that tighten their grip, they find that folks are going to do this anyway. They're going to do it on their personal ChatGPT accounts. They're going to do it in other ways that are not necessarily aligned with your business goals. So it is important to go do that and provide a framework for it. So now that folks have access to the tooling, now you got to create an environment. The second step is creating an environment that can allow and foster folks learning. The mechanism that we see work the best from our customer base is doing some sort of hackathon. This is one of the very first things we did at Zapier is we stopped the company for a week and we said, hey, we want everyone to participate in this, not just engineers. We want folks in HR, folks in accounting, folks in marketing, folks in sales, folks in leadership roles to put their hands on the keyboard and start experimenting, start building with these tools, get comfortable with them, understand what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, that kind of thing. Super powerful to do. As part of that, you want to have a couple mechanisms with the hackathon. One, you want to have some sort of presentation and judging associated with it. The judging creates some accountability. Folks have to show off their work, and it means that folks are going to put the effort in. Two, the judging allows leadership to see what is being built, and it can start to spot ideas that could be prioritized and elevated. Ooh, we like this one. We want to elevate it. It can have a really big impact if we do it in a quote unquote more official way. And the third thing that's really impactful about that judging element is it promotes knowledge sharing. Now everyone in the company can see what other people are doing. And that's really important right now because AI is a new technology. There aren't playbooks, there aren't rule books that are written about this stuff. And so there's a lot that can be learned from watching each other and learning from each other, the various techniques that are working and not working. So those hackathons can be really effective. The third thing that you want to do then is rinse, wash, and repeat. At Zapier, we do this in a couple ways. We do this with regular show and tells as part of our all hands. We invite folks in to come demo off a workflow that they built, something that was maybe difficult to do without AI, and now they're able to do it. And we also do it by repeating those hackathons with some amount of regularity. We do it roughly every 4 to 6 months. That gives people a chance to keep setting aside time to play around with the tooling. And that's important because AI is different than other software. In the past, when you tried software, if you liked it or didn't like it, you could usually safely assume that in the future, you will probably share the same opinion of that. But with AI, the product might look the same 6 months from now, but because the underlying models have gotten better and improved, the experience of using it you might find that something that was impossible 6 months ago is now possible. And something that was maybe possible but hard to do is actually quite easy to do. And so it's important to keep coming back to the technology and trying things again that didn't previously work. And so if you do those kinds of things regularly, if you tell the company you want to do this, if you make sure you're procuring the tools, if you're creating an environment where folks can build and learn and experiment, you are going to find, I would bet, in the course of 6 to 12 months, your usage of AI across the company will shoot straight up. Inside of Zapier, we've gone from the very first time we did one of these hackathons to sub 10% folks using AI as a daily driver of their work to now 97%. And that happened in about 12 months, give or take. And so you can see that kind of transformation happen regularly, relatively quickly by just simply doing a few small steps. And you don't have to make these big Herculean project plans to sort of make that transition happen. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Brandon.
Yeah, well, it does bring me back to March of 2023 because that's really when you talk about this notion of the CEO setting the tone. Like, well, mission accomplished. And what's one thing that I'm reminded of, Wade, is that that first memo that was literally called AI Code Red, that you published on behalf of our leadership team back in March of 23. It wasn't universally beloved in that moment. Um, Now that it's been 2.5 years, I look back on that and I'm like, I am so glad that we did not wait for consensus or total comfort to do that, because what really got folks feeling fluent and confident and capable was actually getting hands on keyboard and experimenting together. Speaking of, um, what is the chief people officer's role within a lot of what we just heard from Wade? Well, in many ways, it's kind of re-examining all of our core talent practices and thinking about, how do we make sure that we have a AI fluent, capable workforce. And so a couple of things that we've done, over the length of time that we heard from Wade. One, we now require some degree of baseline AI fluency for 100% of roles in the company. So for everything we hire for these days, we are looking for AI fluency, and we actually open sourced and published our framework for that, which you see on the screen, but it's also available on LinkedIn and a couple other places we're happy to share because I know it's probably pretty hard to see that on the screen. Similarly, you think about new hire onboarding. You better believe that these days, if you join Zapier as a new hire, a much more substantial portion of that new hire experience is about how to build with AI, certainly on Zapier in particular, especially because it's accessible for folks way outside of engineering and IT. And then a third thing, even more recently, is we started thinking about like what the new roles ought to be, thinking pretty unconventionally about that. And one example right here on Zapier's own people team is a role that we call the AI automation engineer for HR. This type of role could be used all over the place, could be used in finance, sales, you name it. But on the people team, we have someone who wakes up every day thinking about how to scale the AI fluency of their HR peers and how to unblock them when they're building something that could have a lot of impact with AI and have gotten stuck. And this has been a huge enabler for the people team at Zapier. All right, with that being said, let's talk about the second ingredient, culture. And here, again, this is the backbone for transformation. Tools and talent, very important, but the culture piece, essential. What do we really mean by that? Well, Wade mentioned the importance of leadership earlier, and a lot of folks, I think, will rightly say that yes, but when it comes to like the ideas, like what should we build or what's the opportunity, a lot of that stuff often comes from the folks closest to the work. And for what it's worth, I believe that too, but there is no substitute for leadership in the culture equation. And Wade, some things that I saw, you do, all the way back 2.5 years ago, is just modeling the focus and the behaviors that we all were aspiring to. So just specific examples of, sharing openly what you were trying to build with LLMs and Zapier, what have you, and just sharing like, here's the thing I tried, or and also, um, you know, promoting the work of folks throughout the organization, right? So it's like, what the CEO talks about, the examples of work throughout the organization that they loft up, that is a signal to the organization culturally of what really matters at this company. And again, all the way 2.5 years ago, Wade, we'd see you out there just saying, hey, look what so and so built. I think this is so interesting. Like, way to go, like, way to try something new. Uh, and then, Wade, I'll pass it over to you here for a couple other notes.
Yeah, so we mentioned, I think there's a few other things that really can help drive the culture. We already talked about those hackathons, but there's also things you can do on a much more regular basis. I think one, you as a leader should be building this stuff as well too. And that is so powerful when the leadership team actually has practical hands-on experience working with the technology. It doesn't mean that you're the most sophisticated user of AI, that you're doing the most impactful stuff, but it allows you to call balls and strikes inside your organization and see where is there an opportunity to push the team to go further and faster and better with AI? But it also allows you to understand what are the limitations as well too. It's just as easy to be overzealous about AI's capabilities as it is to underestimate it. And AI is just a tool at this point in time. And so you spending time actually investing in hackathons, being a part of the show and tell, and sharing your own use cases can be just such a powerful way for groups to learn as well too. The other thing I think that is really impactful from a rituals point of view is to encourage others to do the same. And so you want to see folks using other tools, trying new workflows, and giving shout outs to those regularly. So whether that's Slack, whether that's your all hands, whether that's another forum that you have in your company, you want to call out folks that are doing new and novel things. The last thing that I would encourage is for the people team in particular. I know we're talking to a lot of chief people officers here and other leaders in people functions. You all play such a critical role in shaping the culture around which this happens. And when the people team is leaning forward on this stuff and saying, hey, we are going to be early adopters, we are going to understand this stuff, it has such a powerful ripple effect on the rest of the organization because the people team holds the levers of so many critical functions in the organization. It owns talent attraction, it owns comp and pay, it owns talent reviews, it owns L&D, it owns all these functions that heavily influence the organization. And when you're lean forward, you reap every other function reaps the benefits of the people org getting excited about this. Where in contrast, when the people org is leaning back, it actually acts as a brake and a deterrent for all the rest of the orgs that may want to do this. And so this is where I think it is so critical that the CEO, the CPO are just on the same page in terms of how you want to go about this. And it is so valuable. Speaking as a CEO, it's so valuable when you have a CPO who's like, yes, let's go get this, because you're able to move in concert much more effectively. Doesn't mean that it's always perfect. There's definitely a fair amount of chaos. There's a beautiful mess that goes on when you're trying to do these things. But it usually happens in a much more energetic and positive way versus, an organization trying to fight each other to make progress. I'll hand it back to you, Brian or Brandon.
Well, speaking of, we heard from Wade about the notion of a hack week as a way to get, the whole team leaning in together and experimenting and sharing what they're learning. Again, Wade talked about, these different cultural ingredients, and experimentation is one of them. Being able to talk about things that didn't work is one of them. Really improves the rate of learning for the team, especially when we're embarking on something new together. And we actually have another opportunity. If you want to know, like, well, what's a practical blueprint for running a AI hackathon or hack week like this? Our head of revenue operations, RevOps, Lindsay, is hosting an event tomorrow. It starts at 10 Pacific time, where she's actually just going to lay out how she and our own go-to-market team did a meaningfully successful hack week just over the last month, as a matter of fact. And so this will be incredibly hands-on and practical, and it's happening tomorrow. And I think we have a note from Ryan in the chat if you want to grab the RSVP link for that. Okay, we talked about those first two ingredients, talent and culture. Now let's talk about the third, success metrics. And again, can't say clearly enough. There's a lot of new and pretty like disorienting stuff going on with AI. It's exciting. I think we're all drinking from a fire hose. It can be helpful when we're guiding our teams through an opportunity like this to anchor on the things that aren't changing, right? The foundation and our organization's existing missions, our strategy and goals, right? Like those naturally change as a result of just like what's going on around us. But um, you know, those are the reasons why we wake up every day. AI gives us some really neat opportunities to take a huge step forward within those missions and goals. And that's why we really wanted to kind of bring this three-part framework home with the setting of success metrics for this notion of an AI first organization. And I can tell you a little bit about where we started and where we are at Zapier on this topic. So when Wade did our AI code red, on behalf of our leadership team 2.5 years ago, we started measuring a couple of things, and all of which we would consider like inputs, not necessarily outputs, but they're important leading indicators on the path to measurable outcomes, like real increases in customer satisfaction, business performance, and so on. And one of those was simply asking the team, to what degree are you using AI in completing your work? And you can see on the left right hand side here, kind of that climb that Wade was describing, all the way up to 97% of Zapians, as we call them, being able to say yes to that question. Now, I will also share with you on the back end, we also have a adjacent dashboard that, in addition to this self-reported AI usage, is also looking at the practical weekly active users and usage patterns of all of our core AI tools in the organization. So we get kind of this two-sided view that's really helpful of both how folks are kind of experiencing AI in their work and the self-reported, along with like just the brass tacks of like what percent of the company is a weekly active user or even a daily active user in some cases of our core AI tools. Now that's all great when it comes to AI adoption. We're really turning our attention now, as we've started to find some progress with the adoption piece, is to what we call AI transformation. And that's more of the outcomes opportunity. That's the work of, hey, given what we've been experimenting with AI, how might we apply some of these new ways of working to speed up response times for customers when they submit a ticket? And how happy are they with the response? And in fact, that's not a hypothetical example. It's probably one of Zapier's leading examples of genuine AI transformation. We have a brilliant customer support leader and team. And over the last 18 months or so, they have designed some new ways of working that resulted in their speed to response or solving a customer's problem. They've doubled it, or it's twice as fast as it used to be, or put another way, it's half as long as it used to be. They've reduced that handle time by 50%. Um, and interestingly, that team guided itself through that change so successfully that, while we're on the topic of engagement scores, that's what we're looking at on the screen right now. Our customer support team at Zapier, during this journey, their engagement scores went up 20 to 30 points on a scale of 100 on almost every single topic. So it really gets to, some of what we heard from Wade earlier about the importance of leadership and culture in not just navigating change, but actually getting to outcomes that stick and represent something really good, certainly for customers, but also for our employees doing the work. All right. Um, let's do some AMA. And by the way, we got a lot of questions in advance, 154 to be precise. We've turned them into themes, and Wade and I are going to rip through these as quickly as we can. Then we'll do a couple demos. Then we'll do AMA that was submitted right here live while we've all been together today, and we'll get through as much of that as possible too. All right. First set of themes. These are all questions related to HR leadership culture and AI adoption. Here's the first one from Matthew. Matthew asks, what future success metrics and indicators are you considering for evaluating AI maturity and impact at Zapier? Wade, how would you want us to think about that?
Well, I think I'd refer back to what you just described, Brandon. I think it starts, and the temptation is to want to measure the concrete ROI right away. But with any new technology, you mostly want to just start by understanding how many experiments are you running. And so simply seeing, hey, how widely is this stuff used? Are people using it? Is usually the first step in the process. Like, we just need to get ideas out in the water. We need to get people playing around with the technology. Then once you sort of have that, you can start to step back and say, okay, now that it is out there, now we can start to figure out exactly how do we go measure that impact. You can look at that on the team by team level. You can look at the organization level. And in this regard, it's not too dissimilar from evaluating any other technology. AI is a tool in that regard. And so you can say, hey, if we're, a sales organization, we can say, well, what metrics do we care about there? Do we care about top line sales, but do we also care about how many leads are coming through the process? What are our response rates? How quickly do we reply to them? Things like that. And AI can act as a tool to improve upon each of those individual metrics. But at the end of the day, you're still measuring mostly the same metrics. It's just AI enables you to achieve those goals in a much more impactful way. And so I don't think you're having to go invent an entirely new category of success metrics. You mostly can just look at the things you care about today and just figure out how can AI actually meaningfully impact and improve our ability to deliver on those metrics.
Yeah. The other thing that Wade and I have observed on this goal setting topic is that, it takes time and focus to experiment, including with AI. And it's a lot easier in terms of like aligning incentives and priorities when you're pointing that experimentation on things that the team already cares about and is already gold on. All right. Arnold's got the next question. How do you create an AI policy that encourages adoption but reduces risk? And I can lead off on this one. Great question. Here, too, I think that our organizations, all of us, can build on top of prior art. And what I mean by that is for a long time now, we have all been considering uh, bringing new technologies into our businesses. And for so much of that, we have a way of thinking about it. Our legal and procurement teams, in particular, around data access and privacy, data retention. Now, in many parts of North America, Europe, and other places, there are also like actual, like kind of like laws and policies around that we are accountable to as well. And all of the uh, kind of workflows that we've put in place pre-AI to help make sure that the technology we bring into our companies, is working as intended and, has like a risk profile that we can be comfortable with. I think we can pull that over. And in fact, practically as Zapper, we have pulled over those concepts and workflows into how we evaluate AI tools. I also think this is a space, and Wade, you can tell me whether you agree or disagree with this, honestly. When it comes to the use of AI, like in policies around that, I believe that some really powerful principles are at least as helpful as specific rules. And the reason I say that is because the capabilities and kind of like use cases for AI are changing so quickly that I think the more precise we try to get with like do exactly this or don't do exactly that, we're just like we're not necessarily in that model like really equipping people to think broadly and apply good judgment for the things that no policy can possibly keep up with. And I'll give you an example of one such principle that I find incredibly helpful. And this is from Brian, Zapier's co-founder and CTO. Brian says, with AI, you can delegate the work, you cannot delegate the accountability. And you just think about the human judgment potential, of everyone in your company holding that idea in their head when they're thinking about, thoughtful use of AI in the organization. And I think that can carry a fair amount of water.
I love it. I think the thing I would add to this, you can think of this question in probably two ways. How can we use AI to reduce risk? And then where does AI potentially introduce risk? And on the reduce risk category, you can think of all the places inside your organization today where you're trying to manage risk, but it is difficult to do without AI. I'll give you an example from inside of a company like Zapier. Is we have a ton of agreements that we agree to with vendors all the time, and we have a very light legal staff. But one of the great ways AI can help us reduce risk is to help us sift through all of the common um, issues that you might find in a contract. And so we're actually able to have AI take a first look at a lot of these things, which allows us to actually do a deeper review of these contracts that in the past we would just sort of click and accept without looking all that closely at it. And so that's an area where AI can act as a really valuable tool to reducing risk. Then there are the places where AI introduces risk. And this comes back to what Brandon is getting at, where you can have someone who delegates the work, but they also delegate the accountability. And that's what can be scary. These AIs are imperfect. And so you often want to have humans in the loop for many tasks that you are doing. You won't fully delegate, you will delegate big chunks of it, and you will have a human audit and review. And that's where I see humans spending more and more, increasingly more and more time in the land of AI and agents. Is our job is to delegate more and more of the task, but we will spend increasing amounts of tasks reviewing the output, making sure that it meets the standards that we care about. Because AI, just like humans, it's not infallible.
Nicholas has the next one. Have you shared deadlines or timelines with employees for AI upskilling and related? How have performance reviews changed? Great question. Um, AI upskilling, I think about this as like a means to an end, and it can feel very amorphous because what that means and what we're really talking about can be different for, recruiting team than for a, um, team of back-end engineers, for example. And so we're putting most of our attention right now is really starting to like circle what we think the big opportunities are. So this it comes back to that foundation we talked about earlier of, how clear are we about what excellence looks like in each part of our organization? How do we measure or goal ourselves on that today? And then within all of those areas, where are the first and second handfuls of places where we think AI can help us take a huge leap forward? To use our customer support team to kind of extend that case study from earlier. The customer support team did a lot of experimentation with AI to figure out their new ways of working. Once they had found their proof of concept, they were like, this works. And they had been doing it in a couple places within support. They were able to come together and say, hey, I think we found something that's really going to work. And now that we've proven it, now we are going to row together, and uh, we are going to path into that new way of working, and our performance expectations are going to change as a result. In the case of the customer support team, they gave themselves a specific length of time to adopt the new ways of working together, and they did a ton of very specific training. But it on this topic of AI upskilling, it wasn't like just general upskilling around like general prompting. It was very mission based. We have a proof of concept about how to reduce the amount of time it takes to answer a customer's problem successfully by 50%. And now that we have the proof of concept, we're going to make sure everyone on our team can do it. And so they focus the reskilling of the team on accomplishing that mission specifically. And I think because it was anchored on something the team already cared about, and because the upskilling was focused on like a very specific change in workflows to achieve that outcome, they were able to make a lot of progress quickly, and the team was able to cross that finish line together. Anything you'd add there, Wade?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is I do think this is a place where judgment is required. And this is where it's so helpful to have a leadership team who is building with AI themselves. You can now make those judgment calls around, hey, is this moving fast enough? Are we being ambitious enough? Um, have we given reasonable time for folks to adopt and figure these things out? It's also where providing lots of experimentation is really helpful because once you start to have an anecdote or two of folks in your organizations that have figured these things out, you can start benchmarking against it. You can say, you can go talk to your most AI sophisticated person in the organization and just say, hey, show me what you learned. How long did it take you to get there? What worked for you? And now you've got a benchmark for how it might work for others. And then you can make a judgment call on what you think is a reasonable timeline for folks to get better and improve at those things, and how much time you need to make available to them so that they can properly make those shifts. And I think, it's going to differ based on different functions and different skills that are required, because the way in which you might use AI is going to vary for different jobs that you have.
Yeah, totally. All right, here's the last one on this question set, and then Wade and I are going to do a little bit of demoing. And it's actually related to this question. So Adam asks, hey, at what point did you each find yourself using AI seamlessly in your executive role? Well, Wade, you tell me what you think. I don't know if I would say it's seamless at this point, but I'll share an example of a way I use AI in my daily workflow in a moment. But I don't know, Wade, like how would you describe kind of your journey these past 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, I think ChatGPT, the launch of GPT-4 in particular into ChatGPT was probably where I started finding myself just reaching to it much more instinctively than before. When ChatGPT launched, it was like, oh, this is cool. And I would sort of occasionally think to go ask it a question, prompt it for a thing or two. But oftentimes I would still just default back to my normal mode of operating. But it felt like something happened with the launch of GPT-4 where the model just got a lot better. And I think partly I also just got better at knowing how to use it. I figured out just like certain tips and tricks, like, I can ask it to prompt itself. Hey, I got to solve this problem. Tell me what prompt you would write. I got better at figuring out how to like extract the information I needed from those tools. And once that started happening, I started finding myself just going to it over and over and over again for a wide array of tasks. And it's to the point where there's not many tasks where I don't at least have an AI sort of sitting alongside me, giving me guidance, suggesting things to me for it at the end of the day. How about you, Brandon?
Similarly, I mean, I think for me, half of the like climb has been like getting a sense of what's possible. And so, part of how I'm upskilling myself is by like all the Slack channels where folks are sharing demos and use cases. Like I'm in it. And one of the most useful workflows I found is like when I see a demo that's related to something I want to incorporate into my work, I'll like watch it, I'll like look at the documentation, and then I will build it myself. In some cases, using something like Zap, you can actually copy the template over, but I try to resist that. I try to build it from scratch because I find that like that's the best way for me to learn. Okay. We talked about this notion of like specific examples or demos earlier, and Wade and I are each going to share one example of how we use AI in our workflow. And I'll go first. Like many leaders, I do one-on-ones. And like many leaders, just by the nature of what a one-on-one is, I never get feedback on how well I am showing up for my direct reports in my one-on-ones with them because it's just the two of us, right? And yeah, like in a lot of organizations, these are some of those moments that matter. They're considered like one of the ingredients for high performing teams. And so what our people team shipped, and actually this is a template that's available on the kind of HR by Zapier page on Zapier's website. We have one-on-one meeting coach. So this is a workflow that uses both automation and AI. And effectively what it does is it pulls the transcript from a one-on-one. Obviously, I tell my folks I'm recording it and why I'm using it, get consent. It pulls the transcript and then it evaluates the conversation on basically like a rubric around like what our research has shown makes for, you know, great, how a manager should show up really effectively in a one-on-one. Then it synthesizes that feedback into effectively a coaching report, and it automatically sends that coaching report to me as a direct message in Slack. And so here you can see, for example, this is the workflow itself. It has many steps. This is why we offered it as a template so that folks don't have to start from scratch. But you can see some of the initial steps here. The trigger is a new Zoom cloud recording. It's filtering for one-on-one recording specifically. It then waits 30 minutes so that the transcript can be posted. It then pulls it and does everything that I just described. And then on this last tab, before I turn it over to Wade for his demo, I'll just show you an example of the coaching output. And you can see how it's structured right here. So it says, hey, on the one-on-one coaching bot, I have some new feedback for you. It gives an overall assessment. It talks about strengths. It talks about things I should do better or differently. And then one of the really neat things that our team built into this particular workflow is it has memory. So it is saving in a Zapier table the transcript and the coaching feedback. And so it's also able to provide thematic coaching on trends over time. So that's one-on-one AI meeting coach. How about you, Wade?
Awesome. Let me show off one. Let me do something live for you all here. This will be a super basic use case. This is the kind of thing that you can walk off this call and start doing today. In fact, there's no reason you can't do this. So I'm going to share here my ChatGPT screen. And so one of the things we use a lot at Zapier is we use tools like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, things like that to better understand how people approach work. And so, Brandon has been kind enough to share with me his own Enneagram. So I can say, hey, I'm the CEO of Zapier. My, Myers Briggs is INTP. I have to give some difficult feedback to Brandon because Brandon, he just he never quite nails it. I kid. Brandon's excellent. The recruiting, let's say it's the recruiting pipeline isn't quite what it needs to be. Can you help me deliver the feedback? Brandon's uh, personality tests are, and then I've got these copied and pasted here. So you can obviously do something super basic like this. Now, while it's thinking, you can go a lot further with this. So for example, this is going to give me like a pretty vanilla answer. It'll probably still be useful. But one of the things I could do is say, actually, can you give me the meeting transcript of the last one-on-one Brandon and I have, or maybe the last like recruiting pipeline review we had? Can you give me the data that we've got behind our recruiting pipeline? And I'm going to paste that in as context as well too to ChatGPT. And then based on all of these things, it can start to suggest much more concrete feedback for you. And this could be really helpful for helping me adapt my feedback in a way that's going to make Brandon better understand it and hopefully be able to adjust and take action on it. Now, the cool thing about this is it's so simple. You can start going to do it today, but my point, you can level it up even more. So you could start to build out an entire profile. So right now I just gave it, these two things I have about Brandon, but I could start to say, actually, here's all the other things I've learned about Brandon. I know that Brandon values truth over peace. I know that Brandon values that fast good news travels fast, bad news travels faster. Like these are things that Brandon has told me over the years, and so I can start to build out a complete profile of him, and I can save that as a project inside of ChatGPT. So now anytime I have to go back and forth and get advice on things I might want to do with Brandon, I can use that project to say, hey, I've got another situation with Brandon that I want your advice on how to work with it with. And then finally, the last thing you can also do is um, put those into workflows. So as Brandon showed you in his own demo, you can take the you can put a step like this as a step inside of it. So every time I've got a meeting with Brandon coming up, I can say, hey, run it through this prompt and give me feedback on how Brandon and I are interacting. What can I do better? What can Brandon do better, etc. And so you can start. The fun thing about AI is you can start with something so simple as this prompt here, where it's just like, hey, I got to give him a little bit of feedback. Here's a little bit of what I know. But then over time, you can build out a more sophisticated prompt. You can add it to an automation, and you can have this stuff now start to run in the background on a persistent basis. And so every time you're stepping out of a meeting or every time you're stepping out of a situation, you can have coaching for yourself, and you can just keep using that to get better and better and better over time. So that's a really simple example of a way that I might use AI to improve my daily work.
Brilliant. All right, you're getting some love in the chat as well, Wade. Excellent. All right, as we pivot the screen back to me, I'm going to call an audible. We had a section on recruiting related questions, but I actually think our team, as a follow up from today, we can send a couple specific resources that practically answer to all of them. There were questions around Zapier's AI fluency framework, for example. There were questions around how we use AI in recruiting, and we actually have some like very tangible things we can share afterwards that you can put to work in your own organizations. And so before we get into live Q&A, I thought we could actually jump to this section around agents and automated workflows. And here's the first one from Joshua. It says, hey, in any given people org, what 3 workflows would you automate first to save the most time for the team? Love this question. While different HR and people teams are different, there are some places when I talk with our peers, like other chief people officers, heads of people operations, heads of talent, and so on. There are some things that keep coming up over and over again as some of the bigger opportunities, and those are the 3 that I'll share right here. So this first one is about effectively headcount approvals and getting new roles posted. Um, if you're brave enough to put it in the chat, you can tell us how long that typically takes you from the very first time a leader thinks that they need to hire someone to when the role is actually posted with a job rubric, with the interview team ready to go, like ready to actually start evaluating candidates. And that's a challenge that we've always had at Zapier as well. And it's a pretty clear place where AI and automation can help. And so what this workflow does is it kind of automatically walks the hiring manager through the intake process that we used to do in more of a one-on-one live format. So it saves a bunch of recruiter time right there. It also gives the hiring manager a running start. where we can help them automatically draft their job description based on either prior hiring they've done or just even a few bullets about the accountabilities of the role that they need to hire for, and then pull together and start preparing the hiring team, um, largely asynchronously, with live kind of prep for the interview team being really the capstone, whereas before we'd be doing a lot of this work in meetings, which can take a lot of time. Also in the area of hiring, gosh, I mean, you think about the work of like personalizing the ongoing conversation with candidates and how hard it can be to make time to do that. Or even if in time were infinite, how hard it can be to just stay on top of everything you've heard from a candidate. What is motivating them to lean into this opportunity? What barriers might be inspiring them to actually maybe lean away? And how can every touch point we have with the candidate play to everything we've talked about with them up to that point? And so again, both the workflow we just looked at and the one we're looking at right now were both built entirely by Zapier's own talent team. No engineers, no IT experts. And this is, I think, like part of the big opportunity for HR teams is not only the impact that you can have with AI, but also the fact that so much of it can be done within our own teams. And this one's exciting. You can see on the screen. I could go ad nauseum about this one, but it's really elegant. And I want to make one particular point with this candidate cultivation agent. The reason this one works and works so well is because, yes, we have a few folks on our talent team who have become skillful builders with automation and AI. But that skill without subject matter expertise can't really be pointed productively in any particular direction. The whole idea for this, right, is born of, folks who've been recruiting and doing talent attraction work for years and know what great looks like. They know what the traditional blockers are, and now they also have some really neat ideas about how AI can help. And so that's really the two-sided coin of where we're seeing a lot of impact with AI. It's the builder skills for sure, but it's also really good domain expertise. And then last but not least, a third example, offboarding employees. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to onboard people into the company. Most organizations, I don't know about you, don't spend a lot of time thinking about how to properly send off employees. And we think that's a moment that matters. But like a lot of organizations, like it's not a place we've always invested a lot of time. Enter more automation in AI. This particular workflow, which is a template on Zapier's HR, the HR by Zapier portion of our website, saves about 5 hours per employee exit, which, by the way, is nothing to scoff at. But it also includes a couple of personalizations that make that experience a couple bits more human than what we had been able to manage before. And I think that's part of the opportunity with AI for HR as well. It's like, yes, saving time and money, that's great, right? CEOs will love that too. But the other thing I know Wade cares about is like, how do we improve quality? Right. So like speed, sure, but also quality. And with AI, we don't have to like kind of navigate the traditional trade-offs that some people associate with speed and quality. It's like, let's go have both because that's part of what the technology makes possible. Okay. This is the last pre-submitted one we'll answer, and then we'll open it up to upvoted questions from the live Q&A. And Wade, I'll pitch this one to you. What new leadership capabilities are needed to guide teams through constant change in AI transformation specifically?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I often see leaders get tripped on in a moment in time like this is we really benefit from a strong curiosity about what's possible, and two, benefit from exercising that curiosity directly. And what do I mean by that? It's somebody actually going out and building workflows, building agents, working with AI to build their own understanding around what this technology can do. I think a pitfall leaders often fall into is that they rely always on their teams and they delegate always to their teams. And in a moment like this, when you do that, you're losing an understanding of what is now possible in your craft. The way in which you could sort of exercise your craft is shifting and changing. And so it is really important that you too shift and learn and upgrade your own craft of your role. And so I think exercising that curiosity and exercising it directly with a project or two goes a really long way in helping you understand how to lead your teams, because now it comes from a practical understanding of what is possible, what isn't possible. And it models the behavior that you want out of your teams as well. It's a lot easier to get your teams to say, hey, we want to go do this. I want you to go do this. If you too are also saying, and I'm doing it as well. And it's candidly more fun. It's fun to work as a team, building these new things, figuring out how to make your workflows better, automating out the drudgery of the work. All of us have jobs that exist with some amount of drudgery. And so doing that as a team effort makes the work a lot more fun.
Speaking of fun, I have a couple invitations for the group before we get into live Q&A, and the first is right here. So we talked about this notion of AI agents earlier, and on October 15th, Emily Maybe, who's the AI automation engineer for HR at Zapier, is going to be doing a part two of a incredibly well attended builder workshop from last month. We had 1,000 RSVPs, 400 people show up live to learn how to build their first agent for HR, and Emily's going to do it again. So this is a hands-on workshop, not being talked at. You will have the opportunity to build an agent with Emily, and that's on October 15th. We'll make sure we send out a link to RSVP for that. Two, we talked about use cases today. There's a lot more than that. We've been cataloging all the use cases that we've been using and seeing our customers build for HR, and they're in an open source booklet. So we'll make sure you get a link to that as a follow-up from today. And last but not least, just this coming Thursday is Zapier's annual user conference. It is called Zap Connect, and among many, many other events that day, we will have a session, a workshop specific to HR with 4 specific demos and use cases that build on what we talked about today. Zap Connect is virtual. You can attend from anywhere, and it is free. With that being said, I think we're ready for Q&A, Brian and Leah. Where should we start? I know we only have 3 minutes, but maybe Wade and I can rip through a couple, like the 2 top questions.
Yeah, let's do it. We got a question here. I'll push it to the stage for you. It's from Kelly from Crunchbase. She's wondering how you're thinking about where AI doesn't belong or doesn't belong yet.
Oh, sure. I can give a really quick answer to this that's specific to HR. We are finding that AI can be quite helpful in helping humans make more informed decisions. Let's say when it comes to a hiring decision or a talent evaluation decision. But we are, to Wade's point from earlier, keeping the humans in the loop when it comes to who's actually accountable for making those talent decisions.
Let's hit this next one. This is a good maybe sneak peek question from Sherwin. Maybe Wade, you could answer this one. A lot of new tools out there. Sorry, I pushed the wrong one, but let's do this one. Maybe a good question is, how do you keep up with everything that's going on, and how do you help the exec team and leadership team keep up as well? How are you kind of coaching people through this? Because we're in the vortex with AI now.
Yeah, it requires constant curiosity, constant experimentation. But the reality is, you're not going to be able to keep up with everything. It's just not possible. But I do think it's part of my job to try new things. And so generally for me, once a week, I'm trying out something new. I'm, downloading a new app or signing up for something new and playing around and trying to get a feel for what it's capable of. Or maybe I'm just trying a new technique with something that I already use, but I haven't quite figured out yet. And so it's just putting in the practice. It's like anything. How do you get good at playing the piano? How do you get good at, shooting a basketball? How do you get good at anything that you might want? Learning a language, and just got to practice it. And so that, I think, is the most impactful thing you can do. And then share your learnings. And if everyone in your organization is doing that, you're going to find that in any sizable organization, your learnings are going to be quite high. And your breadth will be good as well, too, because not everyone will be trying the same things. Folks will be learning different things, and you'll quickly figure out what the most impactful areas to double down on. You'll see, ooh, there's something special going on here. And when you notice those are the use cases that tend to take off like wildfire inside the organization.
Totally. And I think there's just such good opportunity for tire kicking right now. You have sent a few messages in our marketing leadership channel where you're like, has anyone seen this tool? And it's fun to just go in and kind of like kick the tires and share some of the outputs with the team. And then to your point, maybe there's more than just a spark there.
Totally.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. So Brandon, I'm going to let you sign us off here.
Well, I would just say the fact that so many folks wanted to be in this conversation today, I think reflects how timely this topic is and how important it is too. Like we heard, right from Wade, like I can't tell you how fun it is to team with the CEO who understands that people and talent are like right at the center of the AI transformation opportunity. And I think that's part of why, we've been able to learn at the rate we have these past few years, but with plenty more to learn. And so just great to be in community with all of you. We'll have a follow-up that includes the things that we talked about today. And I hope it's a help to you and your organizations. Stay in touch, and thanks.